All right. Hello, hello. My name is Nathan, and welcome to episode 10 of the Weirdest of the Weird podcast. Yeah, it's been. it has been a while. This is. This episode and this culmination of movie reviews is going to be kind of my winter collection pack of movies that I've been reviewing towards the end of 2022 and going into 2023. So I'm very excited. Um, this is a mix of movies that have recently come out, but also, just a mix of movies I wanted to revisit just for the heck of it. Um, but yeah, let's just get right into it. So I figured the first movie that I'd cover, um, would be Knives Out, Glass Onion. The more, this is the most anticipated sequel to the first movie, Knives Out. And if I'm gonna be honest, I preferred the first movie. Um, I like the concept in this second movie being that the solution to the case is hidden in plain sight, as Benoit Blanc puts it in his ridiculous accent. Um, but they really do repeat that message over and over again throughout the film to a point that it becomes a bit of more of a gimmick and slightly annoying, whereas it being, a genius twist. Yeah, it annoyed me. It annoyed me a lot. Um, I do like it that I do like the fact that it takes place during the pandemic. I like the fact that there were some subtle contemporary woke, quote unquote, woke jokes in the first Knives Out movie that were there. And I liked how they were presented. They weren't kind of too over the top, or they weren't very obvious about it, obviously. And I like that about the writing for the first film. And they do present, it being COVID and all. They present it also in a very subtle way of, hey, everyone knows this happened and it sucked, so let's just move on. It's kind of there in the background. um One thing I was surprised by was Ethan Hawke's cameo in this movie. It was just kind of out of nowhere, and it was a little nice detail because he had a very weird ponytail, and I was wondering why is that. And apparently, he was filming the first season of Moon Knight, and if you watch Moon Knight, he has long hair in that show. Um, so yeah, apparently he was filming midway through Moon Knight, and he he was called to do just a quick cameo for this film. So I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, I love the entire cast in this film. Dave Batista was a real surprising standout. I really do like the fact that he's straying away from, you know, doing just Drax. I'm Drax. I'm a strong, hulky kind of guy, and all that stuff. I'm glad that he's starting to take a little bit more serious acting roles. I root for him completely, because he's doing more dramatic roles like uh, knock on the cabin door, and again, he's publicly voiced that he wants to, stray away from Guardians of the Galaxy and not be known for just playing Drax. I love Daniel Craig, of course, him coming back and with his very over the top southern accent was just gets me every time he talks in this film. um but yeah, I loved his character, and I loved Edward Norton. He was a surprising good character. Catherine Hahn, and Janelle Monae. Oh my goodness, she was. she was amazing in this film. She was just also another surprising standout in this film, being the main protagonist of the story. I was really happy by that. And then another movie I wanted to touch on was Babylon. The first thing out of the way, this movie didn't have to be 3 hours long. There's already one film I saw that was 3 hours long at the end of 2022, with blue people, Avatar, and it was actually funny because the first time I came out of watching Babylon, I came out of the theater and I was just like, wow, that was a really long time, but it didn't feel that long. And then when I was looking up details for the film, I was just like, whoa, this movie's 3 hours? Dang, that's crazy. I thought this film was okay. Again, the message of Hollywood and the culture of it and what it's like to be in the showbiz and the glitz and glamour of it. I like the message that the movie portrayed. Um, Again, I thought it could be conveyed in such a way without having to drag the movie out so long. It was a little bit ridiculous that it the creatively that was a decision. Um, One aspect of the film that I did love was Brad Pitt's character. He already played. I mean, he being a big actor in this film, he plays a big actor who is, as his career progresses, um, he starts to come to grips with the fact that he's no longer a popular actor and people don't like his movies, and that more and more of the current audience that's being shown in the film uh, just starts to not like his films and in some cases make fun of his films. Um, and I feel that for Brad Pitt as an actor taking this role for this film, especially because it must have been personal to like take on this role, um, because he has talked about retiring from acting sometime soon. So for him to play this role, it it must have hit with him a little bit emotionally for sure. Um, Margot Robbie's performance was it was okay, I guess. I get that her role is supposed to encapsulate change in Hollywood at that time, but I mean, there were just some scenes of her when she's yelling and she's being excessive with her behavior, and I was just like, no offense to her, but I get that she was trying to get a point across, but I don't think she had to be, you know, as over excessive about it. um, yeah. Oh, and also, the rest of the cast was great, but also it was Olivia Wilde makes a cameo in this movie. It's like a really brief cameo, but I was just like, oh, it's Olivia Wilde. Wow. um, Changing gears from some newer films that have come out, I wanted to touch on a very close holiday classic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's Balto. This movie fucking slaps, bro. This movie is awesome. It's always been a holiday classic for me. Little backstory. In elementary school, we learned about the Iditarod trails in Alaska, and for quote unquote research purposes. I mean, they barely bring up the Iditarod in this film, but it does take place in Alaska. Um, but this talks about one of the dogs, Balto, who races on one of these Iditarod trails to bring back medicine to a town in Alaska that's in desperate need of it. Um, and again, we watched this movie in school, and I loved it. And I love the corny jokes. Um, the jokes and dialogue still get to me to this day. yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I'm a grown person still in love with the kids movie. Um, but yeah, I got this movie by surprise for Christmas, and it's one of my most prized possessions in my vast movie collection. But um, I love it. I love this film. This movie slaps. Um, and to kind of go into the mood of because Valentine's Day was just recently, so I don't know why I did this to myself, but I was just like, how everyone's hopeful and optimistic for Love in the Air, and of course people will watch, you know, the standard go-to Valentine's Day movies like, The Notebook and stuff like that. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do the complete opposite of that. I'm going to watch the most depressing like romantic movies like conceived by man, and one of those movies was Atonement that I watched. uh, I don't I don't know why I did this to myself, but for me, I'm not gonna lie about this. In my eyes, this I love I love love stories, or just in general. I love movies and stories that don't hold back any punches on the scope of realism. you know Stories that you know tell it how it is, a story that I can relate to without it just being like me pointing out and just being like, that would not happen, that would not happen in real life. There is, you know yes, there is such a thing as love at first sight, but you have to build on that. You have to talk to that person first. You don't, to me, I mean, if you can walk up to a girl and just be like, hey, I think you're pretty. Can we go out on a date? Okay. Acknowledge that. Don't just over exaggerate it and, have some, you know. I feel like that's how movies like The Notebook kind of go through it. It's just unnecessary and completely unrealistic on the approach to how to introduce yourself to a person and to get into a relationship. Um, and this movie encapsulates that realism because it talks about two characters who are on two complete different scopes of social status, and they, you know, slowly but gradually start to like each other, but social norms of it being at the time, they can't be together, and it's really tragic to watch because I'm gonna spoil the ending. The ending is not a happy ending. And I feel like that's my biggest peeve because 9 times out of 10 with all romantic stories, it's always a happy ending. And yes, I know that you know it needs to be happy for the sake of the audience because it's nice to see that happy ending, but I feel like it's also important to acknowledge that you know not all stories have happy endings. um and I feel like, yes, while it is something to yearn for when it comes to looking for that right person to love, um I I do like the fact that there is a catch to it, you know, that there is a slight problem to that. You have to give up something in order to love this person. Um and I I think that's why I love this film, is that it isn't afraid to accept that truth of, you know, this is the real world, and that's okay. It sucks, but hey, shit happens. Ooh, and one message again. I'm trying to not spoil this movie. I'm trying to spoil this movie as little as possible. I highly recommend you watch this film. Don't lie. if you are going to lie about something that's short term, okay, that's okay. But if it's a lie that is going to ruin, that you know for a fact it's going to ruin someone else's life or lives, and you know, you're going to you're going to make a lie that involves that person's livelihood, don't do it. One, of course, obviously, it's not good for the other person, but more importantly, you're going to have to live with that lie for the rest of your life. And whatever consequences that follows those lies. So, yeah, just don't do it. Don't do it. And following this, escapade of depressing love stories, the another depressing Valentine's Day film that I watched was Blue Valentine. Um, yes, it is depressing, like Atonement. But I feel like again, it is a raw, realistic, approach to a love story. It is a love story, and again, it does not have like a happy ending. It's, if I could phrase it in one sentence, it's the most realistic breakdown of a relationship throughout time. Um, and it's the director who directed it, Derek Sanfrance. I probably am not pronouncing his name right, but he's done. I think he's one of my favorite directors. He's, yeah, Derek Sanfrance. I apologize in advance for butchering his last name, but he's done The Place Beyond the Pines, which is with Ryan Gosling. This film's also with Ryan Gosling, and more recently, I am trying to make an episode touching solely on this show, but he did a special show for HBO called This Much I Know Is True. And it's, I feel like, the best piece of acting work that Mark Ruffalo has done. It's such a, I'm gonna, it's good, but I wanna dedicate an entire episode to it. But yeah, going back to Blue Valentine, I had to very much so prepare myself emotionally for this film. It's not all depressing, but it is. Well, yeah, mostly it is depressing. But I kept, holding myself back because I was just like, I'm not in a great place. I don't know if I want to further take myself into an even darker place after watching this film. But um, yeah, it's a be warned that it's a hard movie to watch. Um, but yeah, um, this is gonna be such a weird segue. The next film that I watched that I revisited was Godzilla, the 2014 movie. And oh my goodness, can we talk about how I remember when this movie first came out? I was like 15 or 14. I was still in high school, and I was just completely fanboying over this movie. I was like, this is the greatest movie of all time. Ah! I kept saying that, and people like would just look at me like, dude, are you okay? But I don't know, like we were treated so well when this movie came out, cuz this movie, it's it's not only like cinematically really good for a monster movie, but like story-wise, and the fact that Bryan Cranston was in this film, and like this movie really slaps. And again, the cinematography is really good. Um, and yes, I do share the common complaint that the first person point of view of like you only watch the film from like the people's perspective, the main character's perspective, instead of the camera just sitting on a tripod and observing the monster fights that are happening. I didn't like that. Um, but I mean, I do give like credit where it's due to Gareth Edwards for like making a film that in my opinion in the monster verse of Warner Brothers with Godzilla and King Kong and stuff like that, this still holds up as like the best monsterverse film in my opinion. Um and now going back to the vibe of depressing movies, yeah. um Another recent film that I watched, this movie came out um this movie came out in the tail end of 2022, but I believe it's been nominated for some Oscars this year. And that's All Quiet on the Western Front. And like any war film, this movie is, yes, depressing. I feel like this film and 1917 are kind of related, but I say that they're both really good. And what's fascinating is that this film is so this is the First World War, but this is the First World War from the Germans' perspective and how they're losing. And with this film's 2.5 hour runtime, it really does take its time in a good way, pacing wise, to establish a very detailed account of the German soldiers' decreasing morale as the war goes on, and it also shows some of the Germans' leaders trying to negotiate a treaty between the French. Um, and part of what this film, part of what makes this film so depressing, to watch aside from getting to know the main soldiers established and them slowly getting killed as the film goes on, is the warfare and the atmosphere. One fact that the film states at the end is that the front line had barely moved between the war starting in 1914 and ending in 1917. So that's like 3 to 4 years, and both sides did not advance at all. And that's crazy. And considering that 3 million soldiers died uh, in efforts to try and gain, let alone a couple of feet, because again, history lesson for people who don't know, in World War I, trench warfare was established. Um, the war, like the fighting, got so bad to a point that both the French and the Germans kind of dug themselves underground and established, machine gun scopes on both sides and artillery shells, and they would fire grenades and mortars and stuff like that on each other's sides. And in between these two trenches was something called no man's land. And the reason why it's obviously called no man's land is you even so much as peep your head on your side of the trench, you're getting mowed down, you're getting shot. um and yeah, this movie really did a good job of getting all that down to a very realistic degree. um yeah, this movie's been nominated, I believe, for Best Picture, and I'd be totally okay with this film winning that award. It deserves it. And another film that I watched that also came out and has also been, I believe, nominated for some Oscars this year is The Banshees of Inisherin. Um, This film is, in the most pride and in the most, simplest of terms, it's a breakdown of a friendship. Um, and I feel like this film's message is about understanding what relationships we think are important and which ones we think are not. And the relationships that we do share with ours closest, um, those relationships, it kind of asks you, how much you want to care and nurture for that friendship and relationship. And, you know, it makes you question if that relationship really matters. Um, I know for a fact, speaking humbly, I'm an annoying person. I'm a type of person that, I peeve people a lot and force people to be friends with me. And I have treated some relationships closest to me pretty terribly. And I feel like as those experiences force me to question how I look at life. And I feel like Brendan Gleeson's character in this film very much so encapsulates that feeling. When he says he does not want to be friends with Colin Farrell's character, he says the reason why I want to do it is I want my final years to mean something in my life, and I want them to be at peace. I just want to have some peace. Um, and that is a very harsh way. The way he puts it is harsh, but I feel like he does it because he puts it in that way because I feel like realistically there would be no other way to put that into words to another person. Um, and Colin Farrell's character, he's a very sweet, very likable person on the island of Inisherin, where all the characters are live on, where the setting of the film is. And the way that Brendan Gleeson kind of suddenly phrases that um, really makes Colin Farrell's character sad, and you can't help but feel for Colin Farrell's character throughout this film. And it's the way that of how you push someone away like that it matters, how you approach that in such a way and how you phrase your words to tell someone, hey, I just don't want to be friends with you anymore. And again, there is no easy way to push someone away like that. And it's more difficult when that person is your best friend. And I love that this movie made me question relationships in my life and how much I care to another person without making it socially weird. Um, the cinematography in this film is beautiful. If this movie has not been nominated for an Oscar, if it does not win an Oscar for at least best cinematography, I'm gonna be kind of mad about that. This is one of the most beautiful films that I've seen this year by far. And I feel like on a spectrum, because I know that the director of this film has done other projects, but I feel like the two other films I compare this film to is In Bruges and Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. The emotional tone for In Bruges is just straight depression because it's with both actors, and Colin Farrell's character is a depressed hitman who is on a job but wants to kill himself. So there's that. And then there's 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri, in which the mom in that film is straight angry with every single person in this town, let alone the sheriff's department, for her daughter's murder, basically. And I feel like The Banshees of Inisherin fits really well in between these films, but unlike letting the emotion get in the way of the storytelling, this film acknowledges it picks the topic of relationships in our lives, a very realistic topic that I feel like most films don't talk about, and it really makes it, I feel like, the better film out of this director's filmography thus far. So I really love this film for sure. And then to leave things off, I a couple days ago, I think it was about a week and a half ago, I watched the first season of The Bear. Because most people were recommending it, and I do not want to spoil it at all, let alone, but it's a great show. It's one of the best shows that came out this year, and I really hope that they make a second season. Some sequences in the show are like uncut gems, basically chaos happening really fast. Everything is like very fast paced, and there's so much chaotic shit happening as the scene progresses. But I feel like the show kind of nerfs it. It's more, it lets you breathe for a little bit as comparison to Uncut Gems. Jeremy Allen White, who I recognize from Shameless, which is another TV show, he did a fantastic job in the show, as well as the rest of the ensemble cast. I feel like, everyone did an amazing job in the show. And then honorable shout out to Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man Quantumania. It was all right. Some things that I liked out of the gate. Paul Rudd, Jonathan Majors' performance. They both did a really good job. Jonathan Majors, being introduced as Kang, the next Thanos, that was really cool. It's one thing that I've noticed with Marvel movies. I feel like story-wise, they don't take risks, and I understand that, they have to set up the next big thing in the phase, 5 or 6 and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like more and more as their films come out, them not taking risks, makes their films individually start to suck more and more. And I feel like more and more people are starting to catch on to this, and that is what is increasing this sense of franchise superhero fatigue that people have been talking so much about with Ant-Man, or with Marvel and DC films just in general. Excuse me. But yeah, it was a meh. It was an okay film. But yeah, that pretty much ties it into the 10 films that oh wait. Oh wow. I'm so stupid. I just realized. So I just covered 10 films and it's episode 10. Ha ha. Oh wow. I'm so stupid. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to end it for today's episode of the Weirdest of the Weird podcast. As usual, if you like what you're hearing and if you want to hear more, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe. And of course, if you want me to cover something in the future, cover a film, TV show, anything of the sort, just let me know in the comments down below. All right, that's gonna do it. I'll be sure to see you all on the flip side.